Welcome to another episode of the Puncher's Chance podcast. I'm John Lodge, coming to you as always from the Sports Lodge, and I am joined by Jordan Grenke, who's coming to you from a masked Castle Grenke, a mysterious location, we'll call it, a location that's obviously not present because it's packed with people.
What was I thinking with that background? I should have for sure picked an empty arena.
Yeah, I don't know,
Damn it.
but it's all good. I don't think you were fooling too many people, but
No.
you got to have a little bit of a sense of normalcy. We want to see that again. We want to see some some massive crowds in the UFC. We were just probably 2 or 3 years away from it.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple things happening this week. Some massive news in the UFC with the return of the Ultimate Fighter, Dana White's Contender Series. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of everything that's UFC and MMA related, it was Halloween this past weekend. How did that go at Castle Grenke?
But what a different year it was, honestly. I mean, what a strange and different year it was for Halloween. Kids still got dressed up, had a lot of fun. And but it was less walking around the neighborhoods and more just kind of like fun family activities, which was good in a way. I actually thought it was kind of nice to be able to sort of just go out. Not go out and not worry about it being too cold. Last few years has been really, really cold, so it was good. It was good. And let me just get rid of this crowd here for you for a second. Just everyone get out of here. That'd be
gone.
great. There you go.
There we go. That's a little bit
yeah.
more.
That's more on trend, right? No, but it was good. It was safer, a lot more simple. The kids got to bed at a decent hour, so I liked it. I could do Halloween this year, although we did gifts, eh? So like not gifts like .gif, like gifts. So now I'm just worried that every single like little holiday we have has a gift included. So like now it's going to be gifted Halloween, gifted Easter, gifted Christmas, birthday gifts. Who knows?
Where's your Thanksgiving gift? Where's that? It's going to be extended all the way through every single holiday on the calendar, Canadian and American, if you don't put a stop to that real quick. And you got you got a few kids there, so that could get a little pricey, especially kids and the wife. You're having to buy everyone presents. Man, Christmas is too close to that nonsense for that nonsense.
I know, so close. Immediately, everyone turns the calendar after Halloween and then goes, "Oh my gosh, it's 5.5 weeks to Christmas or something, or whatever, however long it was." But it's pretty wild.
Yeah, speaking about Halloween, man, it was weird. I didn't have a single kid show up to the house at all.
Wow.
A little bit of a hidden street, but we normally get 50 to 80 knocks on a regular year, and not a single one. But we gave all the candy away to my nephews. So
there you go.
You
found a good home.
Well, just to ensure that they got their they got a normal share, right? I don't need it around here anyway. I eat enough chocolate as it is. But there was a treat on Thanksgiving or on Halloween night for us UFC fans, and I mean it came in the form of 8 finishes on the card, but the final fight is the one that is on everybody's mind. We're going to start the show off with it is Anderson Silva versus Uriah Hall, and it ended in a predictable fashion. But what came after the finish was not predictable, because what we've seen from Uriah Hall is the opposite of the emotion he showed in the octagon towards Anderson Silva. And it was a moment that us fans that have grown up and watched Silva through his beginning, especially you from even before maybe his time in UFC to coming through his UFC time, that really connected with UFC fans, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it was not uncomfortable, but it was special.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the fight was interesting in a lot of ways. I mean, it was nice for Uriah Hall to kind of get over what I call like the hump, right? And Uriah Hall deserves his praise. And it didn't look like things were really going all that well for him in the early going. In fact, I thought Anderson Silva seemed really, really good. He seemed sort of content to sit back and try and counter Silva. And he was sort of fighting. While he's the quicker fighter, he was fighting at a slower pace, but also had low input. The first 2 rounds, I thought, well, the first round for sure went to Silva. But as the fight progressed, Hall got a little bit more comfortable, started fighting with a little bit more of a sense of urgency. And ultimately, as good as Anderson Silva looked at the ripe old age of 45, Uriah Hall's faster, he's stronger. And it just the chin for Anderson Silva was gone. So it was really, it's also always great to see Anderson Silva in the ring, and it brings back those nostalgic feelings. But ultimately, at the end, it didn't have a good feeling. It didn't make me feel good. It made me feel very sad, to be honest. But I was happy that a champion like that and a legend like that gets to go out on his shield. Hopefully, if it's his last fight, which I do hope it is, he goes out on his shield in the main event, not buried in the undercard or on the prelims.
Yeah, I never would say this in a normal situation, but maybe there was a little bit of not wanting to hit Silva by
Yeah,
Hall,
I
right?
think so too.
That's your that's the legend that you grew up watching. That's the pinnacle of the sport to you. And as he said in the octagon, he's the reason he got into MMA. So yeah, it was very apparent after the fight, but during the fight, it was a question that didn't really pop into my head. I did notice the things that you noticed, but
Hmm.
afterwards, it was that's the thought that entered my head is like, did this guy have so much respect for Anderson Silva that he did not want to be the one who damaged him so much that he couldn't continue, or didn't want to make Anderson Silva a highlight in a bad way, right? He wanted to keep his name up while still progressing forward. The most telling thing about that fight for me was the end when Anderson Silva grabbed for Herb's leg, right? And that was
Yeah.
almost like like, did he know where he was at that moment, what was going on? Did he know that that was Herb, or did he think that that was Uriah? Because in that case, then we know that he maybe was a little punch drunk in that situation.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, again, a 45-year-old taking a hard punch from a very active, well, I mean, Uriah Hall had a little bit of a layoff, but he's a very active fighter, a very strong guy, and his style is counter striking. And he picked up the pace a little bit. And again, I think Dana White, to be honest, kind of said it best. You're looking at one of the most gun shy, counter heavy fighters in that division. It only took him 3 or 4 actual clean shots to get Silva out of there. When you look at what connected and what was blocked. Again, Silva also is not the world beater, invincible, invisible sort of person that he has been in the past. And you know, it was sad to see. If it had been one of those, drag him out, knock him dead, back and forth, everyone taking shots, they're both getting clipped, And again, the first round looked like vintage Silva in a way, but he slowed down, his chin suspect, and I think the Izzy fight is what I mean. That's 2018. That's a couple years ago, when Anderson was actually a little bit more active. I mean, and that's when you really saw the amount of respect, a true respect shown. Izzy was kind of in there having a good sparring match with Silva, and wasn't even it didn't even cross his mind to try and finish him. Just kind of beat him in his own game in a matter of respect. But Izzy's the kind of fighter that can do that. You know, Uriah Hall is somebody who should have won that fight, did win that fight, but yeah, I don't know. To me, it was just a different overall performance, a different finish, and exactly what you said. The way that Silva kind of reacted to being knocked down, and this is a guy who, for I don't know, 7 years was untouchable and invincible. It's just really hard to see, and it's something I don't want to see. And I feel the same way about BJ Penn. I felt the same way about Chuck Liddell. I definitely felt the same way about Matt Hughes, and in a way, even closer to the end of Bisping's career, when I saw what Kelvin Gastelum did to him, when the quick turnaround after the GSP fight, I thought, I don't need to see this. And there's a time, and Father Time's undefeated, John, and Anderson Silva was never going to be the exception to that. But again, not many people get to go out on a 5-round main event headlining fight against a legit contender in their division.
Yeah, it was definitely something hard to watch for Anderson Silva fans. And it's it's not a memory that you really want to have of him, but we do have plenty of memories of Anderson Silva. We have plenty of amazing memories of Anderson Silva, and I'm going to challenge you right now to tell me what your favorite memory of Anderson Silva is inside the octagon.
My God. There's one, it's an early one because I still remember fondly the days where Anderson Silva, he was the first fighter that you ever saw in the UFC to come from a different organization where they actually had to put a lot of hype behind him to get people interested in tuning in. And it didn't take very long. I remember the very first fight he had in the UFC, and it stopped me dead, but it kind of felt like it was a bit of a fluke, like, lucky punch, kind of that, the same way we always get with fighters. But it really was the Chris Lieben Anderson Silva fight. Chris Lieben at the time undefeated. You couldn't the guy would let himself get rocked because he was so super tough just to beat you. He would take 3 shots to land one of his shots, and he came off the Ultimate Fighter. And every fighter in that house had massive hype. They were the new young gun stars of the UFC, and Chris Lieben had been winning fights. He got in there with Anderson Silva, and I remember it being the very first time where I realized that there are certain fighters in this world that are trained better, can do more things, and and they were just on a different level. Um, and there was no ceiling. You had never seen anything like it. You saw tough boxers, you saw tough kickboxers, but he was the first real true MMA elite fighter. Everyone else was growing with the UFC. Anderson Silva, maybe other than having a full length, collegiate wrestling career, was already, I think, a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, high level striker, had amateur boxing bouts, had kickboxing and Muay Thai bouts. He was the most well-rounded that you'd ever seen. And when he got here, it started very quickly and it didn't end really up until that Chris Weidman first defeat. But my favorite memory was the Chris Lieben fight. I remember thinking to myself, it's the first time I've ever felt that in my life, and it's happened less and less since. So you always kind of remember your first time. But yeah, Chris Lieben versus Anderson Silva stands out to me. Um, and also a very, very close second is that first Chael Sonnen fight.
Yeah, for me, and I will admit this openly, it's more of a respect than a fandom. I never really was a fan because I wasn't as deep into MMA as you were, so I came into Anderson Silva a lot later, and the things I remember Anderson Silva for, obviously his greatness, right? But
Oh yeah.
he was always the guy that I wanted to see fall in the same way that people wanted to see Khabib fall,
Hmm.
right? And he did eventually, but I did not like the way that he fell, obviously, to Chris Weidman. That was not something that the first one for sure, with the knockout with the hands down, that
Yeah,
was his
yeah.
own thing. That was his own fault, and that was another one of the reasons why I was a little bit on the fence with Silva. Was it was I guess to me it felt a little cocky, right? It was a little bit maybe believing your own hype, but the respect was always there for the man because of his record, because of what he's been able to do in the octagon, uh, and then going from seeing that dominance to what I saw on Saturday, it's just two different people. And obviously, like you said, Father Time is undefeated.
Mhm.
But does Anderson Silva take another swing at Father Time? Do we see Anderson Silva once again, not in the octagon because that is over, but do we see him once again maybe in another match for another promotion, maybe Bellator?
I really hope not. Whether we do or not, I think the UFC has played this one right. I think initially what's going to happen, it's going to come out very unfairly. That what the UFC is going to do is not let him fight, but hold him to his last fight of his contract so he can't fight somewhere else. It's something the UFC has done in the past with fighters that I'm going to call them their legacy fighters that don't that they don't want to have. I think they did it with Chuck Liddell too. I think Chuck Liddell still had one fight in his contract, and Dana wouldn't let him out of the contract or something along those lines. I'd have to do a bit of a deep dive to find out but it's the precedent has been set. I don't want to see it. I love actually what Connor said, and actually a few other fighters have echoed this as well. I think Jimmy Manuwa kind of mentioned something like this also. But there's competition. He's able to compete, but competing at the highest level as a 45-year-old man who is, I mean, his record is 34-11, and we're talking about somebody who, other than a very controversial Derek Brunson fight back in 2017, he hasn't really won an actual fight since 2012, right? With the Nick Diaz turning into a no contest, right? He's slowed down progressively. His activity, his output. He didn't fight between 2017 and 2019. I mean, again, the injuries and everything else notwithstanding, he's older. I just don't think that He's got so much to do. He's got gyms all over, or all in different spots in America now. I believe he's opening up another one in Las Vegas, if I'm not mistaken. He's a legend. He'll probably never have to pay for another fight ticket again. He's going to be he would make a great ambassador for Brazilian mixed martial arts. He's going to be a celebrity wherever he goes. He's done films. I think the sky is the limit for someone like Anderson Silva, and he'll be revered for as long as he is alive, and probably a lot longer after. I don't think we see him again. I think that he's such a dedicated family man, and he's only ever wanted to be in the UFC since he got here. So I think that after a little bit of time off, and when the emotions sort of subside a little bit, you're going to see him make a formal retirement. He goes right into the UFC Hall of Fame. And usually what I love about that is I like that it kind of closes the door on some people. That's kind of like, once you're in the Hall of Fame, you can hang your hat. You can say, I did this. And George St. Pierre was supposed to go in the Hall of Fame this year, but with COVID, there was no international fight week. So how amazing would it be if this, or if July next year, International Fight Week, the two people inducted to the Hall of Fame are Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre, the two greatest of all time in their eras. Oh, don't get me started.
Yeah, the two torchbearers really for the UFC
Honestly.
in between two different eras, two different divisions, two different styles of fighters, but both
Hmm.
who carried themselves in ways
Absolutely.
that is absolute class and respect, right? As much as I said Silva was a little cocky, and he always carried himself with class and respect. One thing that I maybe would like to see is. And not that we would get the advantage of it because I don't speak his native language, but you're always in need of
Yep.
commentators in the UFC, right? And you're always in need of a fighter
Sure.
who can speak
Oh yeah.
about and break it down in ways that Tony Romo breaks down football for us, right? So I would love to
Hmm.
see him in
Daniel
that
Cormier, right?
aspect, right? Yes, Daniel Cormier, Dan Hardy,
Absolutely.
just the way like Daniel Cormier's on another level. Don't get me wrong, but like just the way these guys don't let them just go off into the ether in the way you used to.
Hmm.
You can use them well beyond that and keep their fandom much more alive in the UFC and keep us enjoying them for years to come.
Exactly.
So yeah, if the UFC wants to hold on to his contract, maybe just change the contract from a fighter to a commentator and keep paying the man.
Yep, I think you can have it also sign him to a whole different contract. Keep his fight contract as something that kind of guarantees doesn't get in the ring with anybody else, and that's going to be a way for him to preserve it because he's a very smart, well-spoken guy. And I actually love this version of Anderson Silva now, who's wise and he's giving. And you're right, the arrogance is sort of gone. And I think that he's embraced this stage of his life really, really well. And I see him being still somebody who's so unbelievably respected by everybody. The way Izzy talks about him, the way Uriah Hall spoke about him, the way Jared Cannonier, after Anderson, that fight ended about the end of the first round when Anderson hurt his leg. It kind of mirrored what happened in the Chris Weidman fight, but it was a different injury altogether. The way people, yeah, Jared Cannonier and all these people talk about him, and the people that have beaten him, the people that have lost with him, even the way Chael Sonnen talks about him now, there's just such a mutual respect and admiration across the board for somebody who's given so much to the sport. So I feel like it's time for him to sit back, let the sport get back to him, and there's no doubt that it will.
Can I just say for a second, what a missed opportunity for Chael Sonnen to not go to the WWE and be the biggest loudmouth heel that company has ever seen?
What I respect about him, and this is a little known fact about Chael Sonnen, he was working with, I believe, remember Jeff Jarrett?
Mhm.
So Jeff Jarrett has another some sort of amateur wrestling thing, and he was getting that up started for a little while, and he was kind of foolish, but he was making his own sort of foray into wrestling. I don't think he wanted to jump in, but what was it called? I think GFW or something along those lines.
Global
But
Force Wrestling, yes.
yeah, so Chael and Jeff Jarrett were associated. Chael was associated with that, but I don't think he was ever built for the WWE. I think Chael is a storyteller and not a story follower. I would be worried someone like Daniel Cormier who could walk the line toe to toe and play that part like you saw after a Stipe win with Brock. I mean, that thing's half staged if it's not completely staged, and I don't care. It was awesome. right? That Daniel Cormier is the guy who can do that. Chael Sonnen marches to the beat of his own drum, always does things his own way. And as soon as he got that contract extension with ESPN, that was it. I knew you'd probably never see him in there, but I agree with you, man. I'd love to see him. He would have that kind of like that nerd, like Daniel Bryan meets like CM Punk. You know what I mean? Like the nerdy, kind of geeky but mouthy and wise guy. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, man, they had CM Punk and he laid pipe bomb. He landed pipe bomb after pipe bomb on them. So yeah, I would love to see it happen. I don't know if we'll ever see it happen, but Chael
What is
Sonnen,
a pipe bomb?
it's like a mic drop. You know, it's just like
Oh,
a
pipe
live
bomb.
mic, yeah, a live mic sort of like situation where they go off of the script and say their own
Yeah.
thing, and
I'll
then the
never forget when.
WWE has a
What,
show. Well, they have a choice of whether to shut the mic off or not, right? And
yeah.
CM Punk never got his mic shut off. So
I
not yet.
remember. I'll never forget the last time I remember seeing a WWE clip on Sports Center was when he came out. Was it during John Cena's match? And he sat on the ramp and just went off on about Vince McMahon and stuff like that. And I've never really gotten to the bottom whether that was scripted or not.
No, that was not scripted. That was one of the specific incidents. And eventually he does get his mic turned off in that situation.
Yeah, yeah.
It's at the end. He looks at the mic and he drops it and he walks away. And yeah, that's one of the specific situations that people
That's
love.
crazy.
And CM
Yeah,
Punk to this day, he's like cried after in the WWE. People want him back, but there's too much actual heat there
yeah.
for him to actually come back.
And
So
there's a big guy he has beef with. What was the guy's name? Some big dude, bald head, big eyes, like starts with an R. I don't know.
Ryback.
He's got beef with Ryback in real life or something, right?
Yeah, Ryback isn't with the company anymore either, so
Oh man.
it's not a big issue anymore. But the dreams of what we see in the WWE, that's for another podcast. We
Yeah.
we have some actual not breaking news, but
Yeah.
some actual UFC news that really excites, but something that we kind of saw coming after the Robert Whittaker post-fight
Right? Right.
comments, and yeah, so now we're going to see Izzy versus Jan Blachowicz for the light heavyweight title. How much does this piss off the main eventers for Saturday's card?
I don't know, man, but honestly, a lot. But I will say, I think that when we start posting the show online or when the show is done being edited, we might just put the new title is, Puncher's Chance predicts again. Like we're getting to the point where it's getting obscene. I mean, whether it was like, I don't even know what to say. Like we kind of have been predicting this thing. I feel like every week we're saying "I told you so." So maybe it's not a puncher's chance. Maybe we're actually pretty decent at this. But yeah, man, what a way to in a way. I don't know. The fight was scheduled, right? So it's hard to say that. I mean, Glover Teixeira versus Thiago Santos was never going to be for the title, anyways. But you kind of thought to yourself, I'm going to get my next shot, and I think they might. I think with the timing, it might be okay. But I hope no one gets injured and there's no waiting. And I hope that. But yeah, anyway, the big news: Israel Adesanya versus Jan Blachowicz for the light heavyweight title. Izzy moving up from 185 to 205. John Jones's former lightweight division. This is so layered. This might as well be a Conor McGregor fight because there's so many layers to this. Izzy is so far ahead of the mental game for everybody. And then right when I thought he was going to shit all over Jan Blachowicz, I watched his scrum today and he's nothing but complimentary about him. I never know which way he's going to go. He hates Paulo Costa. He doubts Yoel Romero. He hates John Jones, criticizes his dead mother. Now he's moving up after Jones moves up when he said he wasn't going to move up. But he did say, John, I'll see you in 2021. And now John's gone. So what, did John run away before 2021? And that Izzy's just keeping his promise? I don't know, man. I don't know. There's too much to this.
So too many people, I think, are writing off Blachowicz in my personal opinion after what we saw him do to was it Cruz, I believe. It was just it was too dominating of a performance. He's got too much power, too much speed. Now we've said that about a lot of people who go to face against Izzy, right? And it's often been said, you can have power, you can have speed, but you got to be able to land it, right? You got to be able to catch this guy, and a lot of people haven't been able to touch him. So Is the hype real? Are we going to see the 205 belt swap over and have another double champ in the UFC? Or is Bohovic actually going to give Izzy a little bit of a challenge here and possibly retain and put an end to all of this nonsense?
You know what? I think that there's a long game in this. Notice how the contract's not signed. Dana White has just said, "Yeah, that's what Izzy wants next." Jan Blachowicz has said, "Yep." And then there's been no contract signed. Now this is different than a no contract. We don't have a contract for Poirier McGregor yet. That's a different scenario. What I do think this is actually more of an ignition for Saturday's fight, right? And I think Thiago Santos came out on Thursday and said to the reporters, when he first saw that, he felt really frustrated. But he spoke with his manager, and he understand how things work, and he needs to do his best. He needs to put on a good performance. I'm sure Glover felt the exact same way. I've won all these fights in a row. I've been headlining these cards. I'm on a 4-fight winning streak. You know, maybe this just actually goes in there, and they go in there and they have the mindset of, I'm going to send Izzy Adesanya back down. I'm going to take that shot away. I don't think the UFC is going to announce this fight until after this weekend, and I think that's going to be an important detail because the cart's not going to be in front of the horse, but it kind of gives a little bit of motivation to our two headliners this Saturday to really make something stand out in a division that keeps getting thinner and thinner. And let's be honest, Dominic Reyes was supposed to be where Jan is.
Reyes,
And
not Cruz. My apologies.
no, that's okay. Um, he was supposed to be in that slot. He was supposed to be the face of the division, the young, hungry champ. There's a monkey wrench in there, and with Jones being gone, letting it all play out like that, I think it's just so interesting. But no, I think that there's more to it. I don't think we see that fight confirmed and signed before Saturday, but I think you see Dana White at the post-fight press conference say, yeah, that's the next fight. Or if Thiago Santos comes out and looks like a world beater and absolutely starches Glover Teixeira in the most impressive fashion. Remember, Thiago Santos has a win over Jan Blachowicz already. And Santos coming off a long layoff after the Jones fight is going to come back, has an impressive performance. You do that rematch for the belt, and then it's still wide open.
Yeah, I was just thinking, looking at Glover's record and looking at his age, this would really be his last run at a possible title shot.
Absolutely.
So this guy must have taken it a little bit sour. And if these guys come out and have a little bit of a dud of a fight, don't have
Yeah.
a fantastic fight, then you know for sure that it's going to be Bohovic versus Adesanya for the light heavyweight title.
Hmm.
I don't know if even a good fight is going to stop that, because you just think about the dollars that pay-per-view will bring. You're having a champion versus a champion, and one could walk away with both belts. And a lot of people think that that's the realistic option. And that also could lead to a future super fight with your maybe greatest fighter of all time, or one of greatest fighters of all time, versus an
Yeah.
upcoming guy who is trying to lay a claim to that title as well. So if you're looking at dollars, the UFC is definitely going to go with the Adesanya versus Bohovic fight. But
Oh, yeah.
if we're talking about best fight out there, then maybe Santos and Teixeira can have something to say about that. There's another fight on this card that I need to talk about, and he's made it all the way to the co-main event of a UFC fight night.
I
Our
can't believe it.
boy, Tanner
Tanner
Boser.
Boser.
On one of the first episodes, we talked about Tanner Boser and how amazing this
Yeah.
kid was, how he was carrying the Canadian flag proud with that mullet and that karate chop, and he's carried it all the way to the co-main event. The heavyweight division is kind of thin. Is Tanner Boser got a shot at making it all the way up the rankings? And maybe, and I know I'm talking early. I know I'm talking crazy. I'm talking a division where Jones still has to jump in. I'm talking to a division where Stipe is still champion. But could we be talking in a little while about Tanner Boser challenging for the strap?
100%. I mean, like, Tanner Boser, we've been talking about since, buried on an undercard of one of the very first or second events that we had for this COVID-19 sort of odd UFC schedule that we have. He's been literally taking names as he went. They gave him Andrei Arlovsky, which a fight that we again announced more or less before it was confirmed on here that it was being discussed. you're looking at he's fighting a former UFC heavyweight champion, who has fought in Strikeforce. He's fought for Bodog, and he's also fought for the UFC. He's been a consistent top 10, top 15 heavyweight, an absolute veteran of the sport. And I think that once you, if or when Tanner was able to get past Andrei Arlovski, you're looking at not only would he be the top ranked fighter out of Canada, more or less right now, he would have to fit somewhere into the top 15 with this victory on a first fight, on a win streak. And you brought up John Jones. This is the kind of opponent, a guy who walks around 235, 240 on fight night, that with a winning streak, that would look like it might be John Jones' first test if he does a test fight at heavyweight or not. So you're looking at somebody who's rising up, right? He's 3-1 in the UFC, 19-6-1 overall in all of MMA. And I'm really excited. I mean, Andrei Arlovski is a well-known fighter, tough, crafty veteran, and this is a real test for Tanner. But yeah, man, again, puncher's chance, saw it coming.
Once again, if you want to know the future, come check out an episode of the Puncher's Chance. We're just like the Simpsons. We're getting it all right.
So we hit that subscribe button, all right? Like
Yes.
we know what we're doing now.
Yeah, well, we definitely have our finger on the pulse of the MMA world. Before we got into the UFC Fight Night, Santos Teixeira, and talking about those guys, we were talking about Blachowicz, we were talking about Adesanya, but we were also talking about Bobby Knuckles. And if it isn't Adesanya, who is next for Robert Whittaker?
This whole thing is so messy, and this is the thing I don't like about Dana White, is that sometimes he will twist words that are said or not said and create a different narrative. And I watch all the post-fight press conferences, and I know what people say and what they don't say. And you have to understand how Robert Whittaker was, the way he was half joking around. It was more self-deprecating humor, but he never said, "I don't want that fight." What he was saying, he's like, well, I'll have to change some things up, and I don't want it right away. I'm having another baby. My wife, I burnt myself out trying to train and having all these kids. I'm having what he considers might be one of his last kids. He wants to be there for those first few months. That's not a crazy request, man. That is a regular, everyday, compassionate request. Jan Blachowicz is doing it right now. He came out of that fight relatively unscathed. He probably could have fought again. Could have fought the winner of this fight, or could have fought a different heavyweight, or sorry, light heavyweight. But he's celebrating the birth of his firstborn. Why not give somebody who's put so much into the company? You're talking about somebody who was on Ultimate Fighter Smash. They're one of the really early and really proud prospects and products of the UFC, who's one of the best fighters in the world, who's been a company man, who sold out different massive arenas on more than one occasion. Like, this guy's done it all. And for him to just come out and say, I gotta go back and I don't want to jump into another fight right away. I'm having another kid. Cut the guy some slack. That is the narrative. Don't make any if or ands or buts or qualms about it. That is the narrative, right? Robert Whittaker has deserved some time off. He just fought Darren Till and Jared Cannonier back to back after coming off the worst loss of his career. Give me a break. The guy donated his own bone marrow to his daughter. Come on. And let's not forget, while I'm on this train, I love Bobby Knuckles, but this gets me pissed off because when Robert Whittaker was in the middle of donating his own bone marrow to his struggling daughter, Dana White called him one of the best, one of the most honorable, one of the toughest human beings in the world. And for him to switch on him so quickly because the guy wants to be there, considering what he's went through, I call fucking bullshit on that, and I didn't like it whatsoever.
It just goes to show how much the dollar matters
Yeah.
to the UFC, to Dana White. And like I said, man, you see Conor McGregor walk in the door, dollar signs enter. Same thing goes for John Jones and Izzy. If you see a fight there, some way, somehow, a path that you can carve to make all that money, especially with the amount of money the UFC must have lost, at least early in the pandemic. There's just the almighty dollar means more to a corporation than a singular person. I wish nothing but the best for Robert Whittaker. He's an excellent fighter. He showed that in the Jared Cannonier fight. Whether or not it would have been the same decision if it was 5 rounds or not, it wasn't 5 rounds, it was 3 rounds, and it was for Robert Whittaker. So I'd love to see him come back against who I don't know, but it won't be Adesanya, because I believe that if Adesanya goes on to beat Bohovich, he'll have to at least fight one other lightweight or heavyweight opponent before going on to a John Jones situation. And I just don't see Bobby Knuckles going up to light heavyweight to fight a guy he couldn't beat
No.
a weight class down. So
Yeah, this is a guy that came up from welterweight originally. He started his career at welterweight, so he's not a big 185er. I mean, if you stand him beside a guy like Luke Rockhold or a guy like Chris Weidman at times,
like a guy like Jared Cannonier, just look at the size difference, right?
honestly, yeah, it really looked like an entire weight class of difference, if not. So, anyways, yeah, I mean, the guy's earned it. The guy's he's done nothing but been a yes guy for the company. He's a great champion, a great ambassador of the sport. And yeah, I mean, give the guy a break. He doesn't have a stub toe. The guy just had two amazing performances against two of the toughest people in his division. And the guy just wants to enjoy his kid being born. Cut him some slack, man.
So you want to talk about a great ambassador and a great champion, a great man for the UFC, and maybe also a great kiss ass. Dana White still considers Habib Nurmagomedov as the champion of the I believe it's lightweight. If you'll correct me if I'm wrong. And
Yep.
he says that he believes that Habib will come back for number 30. So we do not have a possible title fight against McGregor versus whoever, Poirier, Gaethje, whoever it might be.
Yeah.
We now have a champion for
Yep.
or a champion in waiting. So what does
hmm
this do to the division? What does this do to the upcoming fights? And who do you see possibly being number 30? If he's still champion, it can't be GSP.
No. I to be honest, like I love this for all the reasons sometimes I don't like things. I actually love this. Um, I love this whole narrative because remember that after there's nothing that maintains your status in new markets and in other areas that we don't see here in North America sometimes, then by not changing things. There's probably still residuals coming in from the Habib fight, right? There's still replays. There's still people maybe buying it up, rewatching it. You want to keep Habib as absolutely on top of it um, as possible right now. You don't want to take away anything from his steam. He's still top of the news channel in MMA. We are still talking about him right now. His fight is weeks ago at this point. There's been so many fights after. He's a money-making machine even when he's not in the UFC. And to double on that, I genuinely think that there is now, right, what I believe to be the biggest power struggle you've ever seen in the UFC, and it is Conor, who doesn't need the money, versus Dana, who doesn't really need Conor, right? At one point, when the UFC was going through their sale, Conor and Ronda were it. They were the stars. Luckily, we've had other stars, Izzy, Habib, who've all come out of this the post McGregor sort of area, and other guys are starting to rise up, and we're seeing new stars rise. Sean O'Malley, people with a lot of hype behind them. So it's a big power struggle, and we saw this in boxing. This is what happens with the big boxing stars. Conor wants to fight. Dana wants Conor to fight, but under the way he wants Conor to fight. Conor wants to fight the way that he wants to fight. So if you make Conor McGregor your lightweight champion, you're only in for headaches. And I think this is a way to absolutely not guarantee that Conor could be the lightweight champion. Because really the logical thing would be is either Poirier, McGregor, and if you want to throw Michael Chandler in there, you go ahead. Those three guys are all coming off wins. They're the only guys who could fight for the title. Gaethje and Ferguson both have losses. Dan Hooker, we went through this whole thing last week, but I think this is a power play by the UFC to make sure that Conor doesn't gain any more clout and any more control or any more power than he did. Also, Conor doesn't like defending belts. He wins them. He doesn't care about them much anymore. He's there for the achievement and on to the next thing. All the greats did. Very, very few of the greatest people of all time really wanted to but this belt means so much to me. It's an achievement, and they move on. And I'd be worried about that too. Conor wins the title, then what? He gives it back up to somebody, tries to go to 170, goes in and just wants money fights. It's a mess if Conor McGregor is your lightweight champion right now. And I think that's the reason why they're not going to strip Khabib. I've never seen a more clear-cut retirement in all my life. And keep in mind, George St. Pierre ended up getting colitis after he beat Michael Bisping, and he was stripped. And that was what, like 17 days after? Precedent's been there when you want to strip a guy or you don't want to strip a guy. Dana White clearly has motive to not strip Khabib. And even if the conversation sounds like whatever it is, I don't see him coming back and fighting again. And I don't think you want to give the reins to the lightweight division back to Conor McGregor. So this is a win-win for Dana White.
Well, you talk about precedent. They had Cejudo's replacement plan before he was out of the shower. So
Exactly. Yeah.
there's definitely precedent for that.
Yeah.
And I actually remember when GSP retired after the Johnny Hendricks fight, because I shouted at the top of my lungs in the bar that GSP just retired, and I got the entire bar to shut up and look at the TV. So that was I can remember a couple of those retirements and a couple of situations where the belt would have been involved. It's interesting to me that they keep him as champion, and it makes I guess what I'm trying to say is, what's more interesting to me is the fact that I have now heard, and you've said that it's not possible to fight for the belt. So if it's not for the belt, if it's for an interim belt, if it's for something else, I've heard rumors now that we could possibly see Justin Gaethje versus Conor McGregor, and there's a little bit of bad blood between Gaethje and McGregor. So is this something we could see? And if it is something we see, and it is for an interim title, will Gaethje respond the same way he responded last time with the interim title and throw it away?
I don't think we see it. If that is the case, you do see two guys who probably couldn't care less about the interim belt. These are two former interim lightweight champions. They don't care. I don't think you give Gaethje the shot because he is coming off that loss, and a pretty decisive one. It wasn't like it was a close one. It was pretty outmatched. I think that if that was the case, you would be legitimately spitting in Dustin Poirier's face. You've propped this bet up. You've propped this fight to happen. You have a decent guy who has good morals, who's a pillar of his community, also a fan favorite. Very interesting rematch, all that stuff. If you use Dustin Poirier to create hype for a Conor McGregor fight, you are going to lose Dustin Poirier down the road. He's not the kind of guy that forgets stuff like that, and he's been a company man, and I think you got to stick with who you're loyal to, and you got to protect your investments. And Dustin Poirier is a safe and good investment. I don't know what's holding this up, man. I've seen Dustin Poirier tweeted, I think, what was it, as of, I believe, yesterday. He says, me and Conor is the fight January 23rd. Let's make it official. UFC at Dana White. Send me the right contract. Stop playing games. Conor said that's the fight. That's the date. Two guys, what's the holdup? What is the holdup? I don't know how this fight almost a month later is not, I guess almost 3 weeks later is not announced, right? I don't know whether they're waiting for a big reveal this Saturday on ESPN or what the situation is, but it gets more uncomfortable and less likely the closer we get to January 23rd.
And I mean, I couldn't agree with you more with Dustin Poirier, how he holds himself, the kind of man he is. But unfortunately, and to play devil's advocate, bad blood sells more pay-per-views than a good man. So and that's once again where the almighty dollar kicks in, and I could see them maybe weighing that against the what it would cost them to maybe spit in Dustin Poirier's face. And maybe they have already done that by telling him he's not worth what he's asking for, right? So maybe they view that relationship as possibly already soured, and a lot of maybes in that sentence. But this is the fight world, and we see some crazy things happening. I do want to move on, and you did mention upcoming talent in a little bit in your last answer, or the answer previous, and we have we've seen some upcoming talent. Last night we had the announcement of the return of the Ultimate Fighter, and a lot of hype on that. No idea or no hint as to yet of who the coaches will be, but we did get to see some Dana White Contender Series last night, and boy, oh boy, did we get a good night. All 4 fighters ending up with all 4 winners, I should say,
Yep.
ending up with UFC contracts, and we had 2 pretty clean knockouts. The main event had a nice knockout, but we got to talk about the most important one. We got to talk about that punt kick knockout. That's what it looked like to me. It looked like he was punting his head off his body.
To be honest, I've not seen a. The kick was very reminiscent of Anderson Silva, right, against Vitor Belfort, and then a few months later, you saw Lyoto Machida do a similar thing to Randy Couture, and it's become the staple, a staple front kick now, like a teep kick to the face. But it was the first time it ever happened in the octagon was against was Anderson Silva doing it to Vitor Belfort, but it was awesome, head down, and just the way the guy fell. I mean, it was just such a special. The guy was long. It was great, really well done. His hands were sort of down. I actually loved I love Bahamondes, the way he just casually celebrated in the middle of the ring and no big, massive explosion. I don't know what Gomez's head was doing that far low with a fighter that long, but it was super impressive. I loved seeing it. It's going to be, again, highlight finish after highlight finish. The sport is evolving, man, and it is so exciting. But then what happens right after?
Yeah, I know. It was a pretty special knockout
You know
in the
what I
main
mean?
event of the, and it was City Kickboxing, I believe. Izzy's gym showing off with a sweet little hook. I don't. Was that a double hook sort of thing? I know we got him in the tempo with the first one. I don't
Yeah.
know if he connected with the second one, but the first one was the money shot, and that was
Mhm.
just a beautiful knockout.
Well, I was making reference actually to the following fight where Saldana was at the featherweight bout that happened
Oh,
where
okay, my apologies.
well, no,
Let's
but
jump right to the main
Saldana.
event.
No, it's okay. Saldana ends up doing 2 front kicks that knocks his opponent down, and then ends up finishing with him on top. It was like a front kick frenzy. But yeah, I mean, we were all there to watch the main event, and my goodness, I mean, Carlos Ulberg is the real deal. I could not believe this guy was 2-0, fighting another light heavyweight, Bruno Oliveira, who was 8-3 with 6 knockouts. I think 2 submissions on his record. Right? What is a guy 2-0 doing in the UFC at all? And I'm sure Dana White was probably scratching his head, going, "Oh my God!" But man, he did it. Does he ever prove that he belongs in that octagon? You're looking at somebody who is furious. The speed of his hands are crazy. For a guy that size to hit that hard, I think his natural weight class is going to be 185. Maybe he's fighting at 205 out of respect for um, Izzy. He is pretty big, pretty tall, but man, yeah, to catch a guy cut a half coming in like that, just furious. But the hype's real, man. I mean, that city kickboxing gym is on fire. Two champions in very competitive weight classes who are making moves, who look better with each fight. I've yet to see either of the fighters on the goddamn ground. And it just go, and now we have this other likely guy who's going to rise very, very quickly with hands like that in the light heavyweight division. So like City Kickboxing has taken over this small little gym from New Zealand, just changing mixed martial arts. And I, for one, dude, love it.
It just goes to show that iron sharpens iron, right? It's like
Absolutely.
when you are in the gym with the level of talent that City Kickboxing has, especially with Izzy being able to sit under his learning tree, it just produces great fighters. And the guy has a very small record, as we know, like you said, 2-0. But I heard all the right things out of him. I didn't hear
Yeah.
that I'm the man, I'm in the UFC now, and everybody look out. It's no, I've got to go back now. I got to go back to the gym and I got to learn this MMA shit out because
Yeah.
now I'm in the UFC. I'm not just a kickboxer. I
Mhm.
can't just stand on my feet. I've got to learn how to go to the mat, defend, and possibly use the mat as an offensive force as opposed to just standing all
Absolutely.
the time. So hearing the right things, and then also he's humble, right?
Yes.
And you should be humble at that, but we see it so many times where they're not, right? So it's a great thing to see. You're surrounded by greatness all the time, but you're able to be humble about it, and nothing but good things to say, man. An amazing knockout and a
Yeah.
great interview post fight. So
You know what? What I love are fighters that seem to be almost arrogant in their performance, but then humble in victory. And it's the one of the most it's the things that we find endearing. One of the most endearing qualities you have of fighters is you have somebody like Israel Adesanya, very arrogant in there, flashy. Come on, and then once he wins, right? He's love my coaches, love my team. It's respectful. One of my favorite moments in any of the Conor McGregor fights is when he lost to Nate Diaz, and his first interview backstage with Ariel Helwani was simply a, I lost. This is how I lost. This is why I lost. I was overconfident, and then really was self-critical of his performance, and that's what you love about him. The people who respond who are humble in defeat and also humble in victory. I'm not going to say Connor's exactly humble in victory, but for the most part, you're honest. And what I loved about Oberg was that he knew it was a big opportunity for him. He acknowledged it was a big opportunity. He performed very, very well, and was just grateful for the opportunity, especially in this climate. Man, this is a guy who probably could have made his UFC debut 6 months ago if timing was right, or maybe he would have had to wait longer. But in this circumstance, in this current climate that we live in, it was an opportunity that didn't go missed. And I agree with you. I loved seeing somebody who can put it out there, put it on a guy, and then get on the microphone and just be goddamn thankful it went his way. And I love guys that humanizes them for me. And yeah, man, I can't wait to see him in the octagon again.
How about the awkward moment? You didn't watch it, okay? So I know you got to see the highlights and whatnot,
Yeah.
but there was a moment in the interview. I don't know if you saw it. It was the interview with Dana and I can't remember her name, but the post fight um, interviewer, and he was talking about Oberg, and he's not hard to market, is he? He's pretty good looking. And she looks at him and
Yeah.
she's like, can you stop making me say it? Like, obviously the guy's good looking, right? And it's just like a situation where it's like, yeah, what are you
Yeah.
doing there? Like,
Yeah.
it was a moment that made me laugh, and I'm not trying to
No,
call
it's
Dana
good.
out, but that was a funny moment.
I think I love that, and that's what the thing that I love about the Contender Series in general is that it just seems to have this sort of looseness about it. That's what it kind of, even before there was crowd, it was only family and friends that were allowed in to um to watch those fights anyway. So even the small crowd doesn't really seem to bother me all that much. But what I do love is the fact that you do see Dana kind of doing what he has always been a fan of doing. But it is pretty funny, and the way he interacts with Laura Sanko is really interesting because, like, you have to realize that Laura Sanko is a former fighter. She's not just a pretty face. She knows what she's doing. She's great on the microphone. She has great mic control. She's actually a really good product for the UFC and for ESPN. But I do think it is kind of funny, and she's obviously been around Dana White enough to know him, and they kind of have a bit of a jovial back and forth. But I just love the fact that it's so laid back, and it's one of my favorite things. So to see that, and then what was it? Didn't they fist bump after? They were like,
Yeah, I
as
think so. Yeah.
yeah, and it's so awkward, but it's so real, and I like that.
It just kind of feels like just your anywhere gym, your everyday gym, where you could walk in and be seeing that conversation with two people or three people anywhere you go, and it
Yeah,
happens to be Dana White, right? So
yeah,
it's
your
interesting to
boss.
see. Yeah, it's interesting to see, and I could just imagine if I was trying to have a conversation that was that
Oh,
casual with Dana White, I'd probably be so
never.
uptight and nervous. I'd say the wrong thing. So I can imagine the nerves. Before we get out of the Contender Series,
Yep.
I know I started off by talking about Bahamondes, but we were talking about the post interviews, and I,
Hmm.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring up his post interview. And the
Oh
guy
man.
just looked like he was having the time of his life. He was so excited just to be there, and then the fact that when he realized he's going to get to do this for a living now,
Hmm.
and this is the real deal. He's in the big leagues. I mean, it was like seeing a little boy who got drafted to the NHL, right?
Yeah.
Just to see that jovialness of it. It was just
Yeah.
infectious.
It really, and again, we're talking about real, genuine, and raw moments between people who are. It's a life-changing thing. I mean, I know the contracts vary. I can't remember what the exact number is, but it's a huge opportunity. It's your first. Some people, it's their first televised audience, right? It's a great way for you to make new fans, for you to get your name out there, and especially just hearing Dana White call your name, and that's what I love about it. They're all sitting in those like director chairs waiting, and then Dana comes out. He's got a piece of paper that just has a bunch of fucking circles on it and a few notes, and it's just like, I'm gonna give him a shot, or it's like no brainer. It's such a cool moment. It's exactly what you said. It's like announcing the winner of something, or like it has like an NFL draft or NHL draft feel to it. And they're right there. They get to walk. Dana's watching all their fights. Another thing I love too. You're not got scouting for talent. You've got the boss of the company making a unilateral decision about the way he sees you as a fighter, man. It's one thing to earn a victory or to be scouted and have your analytics drawn up and your point percentages and your averages. No. This is the boss of the company, the figurehead of the sport, if you really think about it. And then he gets to say yes or no and give you a shot in the biggest MMA organization on the planet live in front of you. I just can't think of another scenario where I was trying to compare it to like winning an Oscar, but Oscars are paid for. Like it's money exchanging hands, and it's all money gum basically. But this is as real as it gets, which is what the UFC always does. And if you can get Dana White excited about your fighting career, man, it's not a bad thing, John.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say is like it's almost akin to having Gary Bettman show up to your junior game, right? Or
Yeah.
having Adam Silver show up to your high school basketball match,
Except there's no association,
and
there's no
yeah,
union, there's
that's
no
it.
like team, right? Yeah.
It's just a unilateral decision. And I mean, it
Yeah.
might be easier for Dana White to do it than those other guys because of the
Sure.
sheer size of the leagues. But
Of course.
MMA is huge, right? It's a worldwide sport. There's a lot of fighters to look at, and it's one thing to have to do that in front of a guy who relays that to a guy who relays that to a guy who then shows
Yeah.
the tape to Dana White. It's a whole nother thing to damn near punt someone's head off right in front of the boss, and then he comes in and he says, "That's number one on ESPN, by the way."
Yeah, I couldn't, and that was a tweet. And again, I'm the kind of guy that's got Dana White on his notifications. I am like waiting for fight announcements, and his tweets when they go out go out to a lot of people. And if you're like me, and I missed the knockout when it happened live, but once I saw it just on Dana White's clip, I went, oh man, it made me go find the replay later on. I was excited to watch Dana White Contender Series on the replay or on the staggered time slot because he sent out that clip. So he's no dummy. He knows what he's doing. But and it was. I mean, I don't remember if it was number one on Sports Center, but I know that it definitely made it because I've been seeing it make the rounds all day today.
Yeah, and like you said, it helps Bahamondes make more fans, right? It gets his
Absolutely.
that's a hard name to get into every household. So if
Well,
you
here we
can,
are with Adesanya version 2, Adesanya, and
yeah.
they've been just fine with him.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to get him talked about. Before we get out of here, we got to talk a little bit Ultimate Fighter. Don't have a lot of information, but we
Right.
know it's middleweights versus bantamweights. So give
Yeah.
me a projection. Give me your dream. I know that we've heard the Habib
hmm
McGregor is in the toilet. That's never going to happen, or that's never going to happen. So who do you want to see in the most realistic sense in this fight, or as coaches, I should say?
Oh my goodness. Oh God, that's put me on the spot with this one. I like it when the fights make sense. That's what I like. I've always liked it when you've had one of my favorite seasons was one of the least watched seasons, and it was the actual American Top Team versus the Black Zillions. Two different fight gyms, um, basically being against each other, and they're both in Florida. And I like that. There was this kinship, and it meant something, right? So, um, if I were to pick two guys, I mean, it would be cool to see Jones and Izzy, right? Just to see them go back and forth. John Jones has kind of done that. He's kind of a been there, done that kind of guy. Um, I actually love the idea of there being legends coaches. I remember shooting that idea around. But as far as current fighters go, there isn't a massive rivalry or anybody sort of returning. I mean, you're not going to do and what do you do in the pandemic? You're not going to fly in Max Holloway to do a season in the Ultimate Fighter. Who's available, right? Is it Tony Ferguson? Does he return back to where he started? I don't know, but I say this too, John. With there's got to be something big that's going to happen because this is the return of the show that really put mixed martial arts on the map. And when Dana White tells that story of Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner fighting, and by the first round, there was like 500,000 people watching Spike TV, and then by the middle of round 2, there was 1 million, and by the end of the third round, there was 3 million because people were calling their friends saying you have to watch this. I was legitimately one of those people who was calling my friends on a Saturday night, being like, "If you don't turn on Spike TV right now, you're crazy. This fight is mental," because I'd never seen anything like it. So if you're going to come back and make a splash, I think what you have to do, if you're going to reboot this thing, it's got to be somebody big, because you got to think like, it's got to be someone that's going to make waves. It can't just be somebody who is just going to do nothing, right? So here's what I think. If you want to make some real good TV, I think the only two guys I can think of to be tough coaches, right, are Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington.
Oof, those would be two guys who aren't afraid to
That's
speak their minds,
can't miss TV.
and that really would be can't miss TV. I liked what you said about the two gyms, and that's an interesting concept, because we're talking about city kickboxing, right? And we've talked about American Top Team and all these other gyms, and each gym kind of has at least one marquee fighter. Could we not see an Ultimate Fighter where we just pit gym versus gym, and then you have those coaches that are in that gym are training one team, and then those coaches and fighters from another gym, and then you just go head to head? And you could even build a whole card. Your main event is your two main fighters, and then you know what I mean? You see where I'm going with this?
Of
Could we
course.
see that situation?
I love the concept. The problem is it's all numbers, right? When ratings don't do anything, right, or when the ratings aren't there, then you know you're not going to try that again, right? So it's a great theory and concept, and I thought it was executed. They changed the graphics, the whole thing. The show was completely different. The fights actually were great. That's where we got to see Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman came out of that season, right? And you got to see other fighters, right? You got to see a guy like Tyrone Spong, who's more of a kickboxer that wants to fight MMA, and the dynamics of the gyms and the rivalry, and there's just something about it. But the Ultimate Fighter slowly over the years, and the amount of seasons that it's had, has even lost interest for like the pundits. I mean, I can stand here fairly easily and and uh and say that, like, unless it's going to really like shake it up, I'm going to watch it because I'm a junkie. But unless the UFC does something dramatically different with the Ultimate Fighter, I can sit here pretty honestly and say that I'm not overly particularly excited for it to come back. I think it's an important part, and there's a new generation of fans, which is why you want to reintroduce it. But you can't reintroduce it with the sort of dying season that the Cejudo versus Benavidez season. I couldn't tell you one fighter that came out of there. I wanted to see it regain its relevance. And I think the Habib McGregor rumor of them being coaches was just to kind of ignite a little bit of excitement about what people call tough, right? This is the 29th season of the show. I thought it would be cool to have TJ Dillashaw and Uriah Faber, because there's a huge kind of rivalry there. But then I thought to myself, maybe this is what they're saving Michael Chandler for. Maybe you introduce Michael Chandler to a whole world of people. Is he big enough, though? Throwing him into the Ultimate Fighter gives him the extra promotion, a little bit of extra cash. He's guaranteed to fight a top contender, right? And imagine if of all the contenders, you got somebody like Tony Ferguson. That's good. It's just there. It's good enough to be interesting, considering the people that will compete on the show. What has grown over the years is the talent that has gone into the show. Every season, fighters get better and better and are more well-rounded, and they're almost at the same level as the coaches sometimes, or some of the other coaches on the team. But I think you do Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. That fight needs to happen anyways. You're never going to get Nate Diaz back there to coach anyways. You want someone who's going to stir up controversy. Like you said, drama sells, and you need to have something dramatic. So if you can't do Jorge Masvidal versus Colby Covington, I say you try something like, Tony Ferguson and Michael Chandler. That's it.
That'd be interesting. Last thing on tough. We've seen the Dana White Contender Series. and it just hit me as you were speaking about it. Is it a possibility where we see guys from the Contender Series and we pair this up? Let's take, you got to go through the Contender Series, but then the guys from the Contender Series, you make a pool of them, and then those guys go to the Ultimate Fighter. Now I know the Ultimate Fighter has been for contracts in the UFC
Mhm.
before, and these guys at Contender Series have earned their contract already, so there'd be a little bit of a change have to be made. But it would also give these guys who have just been in the Contender Series and then disappear from my TV for God knows how long till I see them
Mhm.
on an undercard somewhere. That gives them also more time to build a name and build a brand within the UFC.
What I like about the Dana White Contender Series is that you have sort of raw talent and you're building them slowly. And I've always kind of looked at it like this. I always looked at the Contender Series as a really cool way to build up your early prelims on fight cards. The Ultimate Fighter is a great way to build up your prelim headliners, and then the best of both of them, whoever builds their career the best, gets to go on the main cards. And it's kind of where I see it. I see as Dana White Contender Series being raw, and you take chances with guys. Your Greg Hardys, right? The Olbergs that we just saw, right? The people who are 2-0 perhaps. You see stuff like that. But the Ultimate Fighter, I don't remember seeing anybody who hasn't. At one point, you had to have at least 10 fights to be on the Ultimate Fighter, and I think it's a proving ground to see how much you got. You can be a flash in the pan, but you got to understand that the Ultimate Fighter did this really good thing where they used to explain to people how, for lack of a better term, no pun intended, how tough it was to be on, right? To be without internet, no phone for 8-9 weeks at a time, training all the time, fighting, but sometimes every week, right? It was the hardest competition in sports, and rightfully so. Some guys would cut weight and be just cutting weight the whole time to stay on weight. It's a really grueling process, and it really shows you the life of a fighter, and that was what was so cool about it. It got a little reality TV like, and then it got a little too showy, and then it was got a little too kind of oddly sexy at one point, and it was all over the place at the end, right? But it is a great way to show the high caliber of fighter. And the Dana White Contender Series, I think, is for raw talent or for people who need a stage. I think the Ultimate Fighter is the ultimate proving ground to see where you are in the sport and just how tough and how consistently you can perform. And that's why it's so essential. So I think you got two levels to it. And I think those levels are important.
Okay. All right. So moving on from that, there are a couple things that we have to cover before we get out of here. Before we get out of the UFC and talk about a fight that took place tonight, we
Yeah.
have to talk about something that a fight that may not happen. I don't know. I have no inside knowledge here. I only have the knowledge that everybody has access to on Twitter. But Leon Edwards versus Hazmat Chimaev, I do know that the country of England has gone under another lockdown, and he might not be
Yeah.
able to get out of the country. So we may not get the fight that we've been looking forward to. Jordan, what's the likelihood of Leon Edwards not having another fight in the UFC at this point?
I think you'll get him out of there. I was so worried about this when I saw, through a series of tweets, what was going to happen with England. What's good is that public transit not going to happen. You can't fly out of there. There is still the exception of flying out there private. What sucks is that if you're going to fly in private, you're quarantined, and then when you fly out. So I think the UFC goes in there. They get Leon Edwards, who will probably have to quarantine maybe even a full week beforehand. You get him on a private plane. A lot of the liability is covered as well because you're not traveling with other passengers. When people fly private, you do assume a lot of your responsibility, your own costs, and your own liability. I think you fly a jet in there. I love how this is just like a normal thing that gets roll off the tongue. The UFC flies in a jet in there. You grab Leon Edwards, you pick up his team, you bring him back to Vegas, and that's ultimately what the fight will be. I think it's concerning for sure. I think the UFC has a solid team of people who are able to sort of predict and to respond to these things pretty well. I mean, look at what they've done in the pandemic so far. So I don't think that the fight is in jeopardy necessarily. It's definitely made me want the fight even more because I might not be able to have it. But I think the UFC's got contingencies. They've learned and they've grown throughout this whole thing. And my God, man, if Leon Edwards doesn't get this fight, like he might just retire. Like the guy just, I mean, he's a healthy guy, a little banged up here and there, but a guy who's literally been looking for a fight for almost a year.
Talk about bad luck, right? Like,
Oh,
if that's your streak of bad luck, maybe you just do need to walk away and take a break. Well, I hope to see it. I really do. This is a fight that we both want to see. We're both excited to see Edwards versus Chimaev. So hopefully the UFC have a way of getting him out of the country and
agreed.
The problem with that is I've heard is the time away from the family, right? When do you get him
Yeah.
out? How long is he going to be away from his family? Et cetera, et cetera. There are extenuating factors to all of this. These are human beings we're talking about. Before we get out of here, man, got to go over to Bellator for a second. Our boy Corey Anderson. He,
Got it done.
uh, he got it done tonight. But before we talk about how he got it done, let's talk about how he walked in to the fight. Walked in to the Hulk Hogan theme music, and what an
Unreal.
entrance to make, right?
You know, why not? With no one in the crowd and it being an empty arena, like why not? I love it. You know, there's always been this. Melvin Manhoff has always fought like, you know, the American. There's always all this thing. I'm of the crowd that, first of all, amazing walkout. I mean, if you're gonna do it right, you're gonna do it right. But we're talking about a guy who used to have the nickname Beast in at 25-8. Nothing with Corey Anderson's gonna surprise me. He looked like he was well on. He looked like he had a well-rounded attack. He didn't seem all that afraid to trade with Manhoff, which was pretty wild considering that was Manhoff's only way he was going to win that fight. Um, the thing is, I get sad with Melvin Manhoff too because he was a world beater at one point, and I just don't think he should be fighting anymore. You know, he's 44, a lifelong martial artist. He's already retired in boxing, right? And now he wants his final MMA fight to be in his home country, the Netherlands. So, you know, he's a guy that's kind of the same era as Anderson Silva, tougher than nails, has had a suspect chin for a while, but man, I mean, Corey Anderson's top 5 lightweight in the world. Melvin Manhoff was fighting one weight class above what I think his weight should be, if maybe even 2, depending on how much weight he had cut. But just looked like an old guy who used to throw hands, and hopefully that's it for him too. But good for Corey Anderson, man. Headlining fight, big name, good paycheck for him. I think you throw him right in with the champ now. I think you let everyone else behind him in a very, very, although if you talk to Scott Coker, he says it's the best light heavyweight division in the world. Definitely arguable there. But I do think that you need to see him just go up and fight for the title. I think you make him the face of that division. I think you're able to sell him pretty well. So good things for Corey Anderson coming soon here, and good for him, man. Good win.
Yeah, and I mean he's right in that age pocket where he's not that old of a guy, right? He's a pretty young
31.
fighter. Yeah,
He's 31.
yeah, he's pretty young fighter,
But
right?
he
So
looks 40. Like Corey Anderson is the oldest looking 31-year-old I've ever seen.
yeah, well, he had some issues. We talked about it in post or past issues where he had
Mhm.
some health or past
Yeah.
episodes, I should say, where he had some health issues. So that can take a toll on a guy. But I mean, as a 31-year-old, but I guess the point I'm making is when you're normally talking about Bellator, sometimes you're talking about fighters that passed their prime, right?
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
this is not one of those guys, and so to be able to have a Corey Anderson who could lead your light heavyweight division, we had talked previously that he needed to get a win before getting a shot at the title to get his feet wet, to get him in the rankings, get him going in Bellator, and he got that dominant performance, ground and pound, finished him with the elbows,
Yeah.
some nasty elbows. So good for Corey Anderson. It was good to see. And like you said, man, now it's time to put him against the toughest guy in the division. Let's give him a shot
Yeah.
at the title, and let's see if he can carry the light heavyweight division. I don't think it's the best light heavyweight
You know
division,
what?
though.
No, I completely agree as well. They've got some great fighters like Ryan Bader, Phil Davis. They're still great fighters, but I think they've kind of done what they were going to do. Ryan Bader's impressive run at both like light heavyweight and heavyweight was super impressive. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think that Corey Anderson could be the face of that. If you just looked at the amount of support that was drawn out for him, you're looking at Mike the Truth Jackson, MMA staple, Daniel Cormier, Luke Thomas. People were actually tuning in for his fight. Jimmy Manawa, right, a guy that's knocked him out in the past. I love the outpouring of support. I thought it was so great to see that, and I think that he carries a lot of value. Right, he's a very well-rounded, quick guy. You're talking about a guy that stopped Johnny Walker. You're talking about a guy who was on the way up, was kind of, in a sense, kind of reaching his prime a little bit I might be reaching his prime, but it's a great place for him to grow. He was pretty inconsistent at times in light heavyweight division of the UFC, and you know, he's still putting it all together, and he's going to put on some entertaining fights. That was a great performance by him. Good strikes. He was landing on his feet. He took the fight where he was most comfortable and got the job done. Got a finish. You know, got a finish over a legend of the sport in a way, and a notoriously tough guy. So I agree with you, John. I think you put him in the right fights. You put him in the right spots. I say you give him the title shot, see how he does. He loses, he goes and fights Bader. He wins, right? He still fights Bader or fights Machida or fights there's fights, right? But yeah, I really loved it. You know, I love the support. And as much as I have had my issues with Corey Anderson and some of the stuff, but I think you give him Vadim Nemkov, who just recently beat Ryan Bader. You give him that fight for the 205 belt. I think it's a no-brainer for Bellator. Bellator just lost their most marketable fighter to the UFC, and that was Michael Chandler. I think you got to be building names. The other two big fighters, Gegard Mousasi and Douglas Lima, they just fought each other, which was kind of poorly timed in a way, but was still exciting. I think if you're Bellator, you have to do big fights all the time, right? Chael's gone. Fedor is going to be on close to his last fight. You know, you've got an age-heavy roster to headline cards, and you've got a lot of young talent coming up that aren't headliners yet. So, yeah, there's my Bellator rant for the week.
All right, well, that's all we got for this week on this episode of the Puncher's Chance podcast. Look at us. We just set a record for this week, man. I guarantee the only podcast to go an hour and a half and not mention politics once. So
that's right. That's right.
We're going to get out of here before we get into that conversation. That's a conversation for another place, another time, and another YouTube show, not the Puncher's Chance. We love you all. We want you all to listen. And yeah, so that's all we got for this week. Thanks for watching. Make sure to click that like, subscribe. Let us know what you want to hear. I'm John Lodge. That's Jordan Granke. We'll be back next week for another episode of The Puncher's Chance. Peace.